Now the floor goes to Quaker, Council for European Affairs. We are all giving the same amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Quaker Council for European Affairs. As requested, I'll begin with our recommendations. Firstly, the Quaker Council for European Affairs calls on European governments to have the political and moral courage to end the detention of child migrants and to humanize Europe's borders as a matter of urgency and in the name of human rights. Secondly, we also call on Europe's policymakers to resist hate speech and fear-mongering towards migrants and refugees, to consider the consequences of their words, and to reflect on the lessons of history. For hundreds of years, the Quakers have been at the forefront of efforts to build tolerant, peaceful societies which offer sanctuary to those who need it most. The question of migrant rights is therefore of great importance to us, and much of our work in Brussels is currently devoted to this matter. As such, we regret the continuing demonization of migrants and refugees, not to mention the denigration of their fundamental rights, which currently characterizes so much of European policymaking and discourse. An important example of this is the continuing detention of children simply because of their migration status. Across Europe, hundreds of young people are held in secure facilities, either with or without their parents, which are no place for a child. Here in Poland, almost 50 migrant children are detained as we speak. Behind barbed wire, a child's capacity for intellectual and social development is severely curtailed, and they are at grave risk of both physical and sexual violence. Such treatment is not just immoral, but illegal. Indeed, international law is very clear on this matter. The European Court of Human Rights, to which many countries represented here are party, has ruled that states have an obligation to consider the best interests of child migrants and that the vulnerability of a child takes precedence over their immigration status. If these young people are not vulnerable, then who is? Sadly, the inexcusable caging of children is just one example of the creeping securitization of Europe at the expense of its values, a trend being fueled by populism and xenophobia. The European Union's forthcoming budget for the next 7 years is a worrying testament to this. It foresees billions of euros of additional spending for external border controls, many of which will be implemented at the national level with very little scope for oversight or safeguarding. The budget also includes worrying proposals to train and equip armies in Africa without the need to seek consent from the European Parliament. The EU claims that these measures will reduce instability in Africa, thereby addressing the root causes of migration. But by arming questionable regimes in the name of a quick fix, Europe actually risks compounding the very oppression and violence which drives people to flee their homes. To those representatives of EU member states present here today, I ask this: how can you reconcile these policies with international refugee conventions, with the founding values of the European Union, or even common decency? Migrant rights are human rights, and as such, respect for the rights of migrants today is the litmus test for Europe's human rights framework tomorrow. I'd like to finish by making a comment about the European Court of Human Rights, which I previously mentioned. The fundamental rights standards which the governments of Europe established after the Second World War were in response to some of the most heinous crimes perpetrated in human history. These crimes ended with persecution and genocide on a massive scale, but they began with precisely the fear-mongering and demonization of the other which we witness once again today, even in this room. It's a source of great sadness to hear words such as these in the mouths of some of Europe's politicians, people whose power rests on flags and Bibles, on barbed wire and rubber bullets. These men are not here today, but their representatives are. To them I say this: even when maintained by fear, power is fleeting, but the judgment of history is eternal. Those who peddle hatred and division are never remembered as great, only cowardly. So I ask, how do you wish to be remembered? Thank you.